then I'm going to invite our next group up here to the stage, which is an organization by the name of NextStep. So, yep. Oh, okay. You know what? Emmanuel, can I have your assistance? They do have a presentation, so. Could you forward that to me, just because we're recording?
And by the way, just one other comment, Renette, that was terrific. So you don't get charged when you contact Renette, because HCU Network America entered into a consulting contract with Renette for this year. So her services are available, and my encouragement is take advantage of that, get her advice on the issues that you are dealing with, because the knowledge that she has can cut through those hoops and get you, much higher up in the priority list.
So whenever you call an insurance company, plan on being on hold. Yeah, just plan on it, put it on speaker, do something else. You're gonna sit on hold. I sit on hold. I think the longest I've ever been on hold was 3 hours.
Is there a way to have a...
Yeah, and one other suggestion. Whoever is providing you with your health plan, in many cases it would be an employer, if you can't get successful resolution through the customer service area, I've gone to the employer that's given me the benefit before. Go to the human resource department and say, is there someone I can talk to? I'm having a major problem getting a resolution of this issue. And if the person who makes the decision as to what health plan they're going to contract with calls up the health plan and says, hey, one of our employees or an employee's spouse can't get a resolution, they're going to pay attention and they're going to listen to that. Rainette has something else to add to that?
Hello all. I just would like to mention that, just to add on to what Margie had mentioned, it's a medical food exclusion removal letter if it's related to medical foods and low-protein food and formula issues, including supplements now, because we're all going to work with the supplement part. Making sure that everything is in writing by your doctor on this letter of medical necessity and medical food exclusion. Why? Because you will talk your brain off to someone in the HR department and trying to have them understand exactly what conditions this is. So just give them a letter. Here's a medical food exclusion. Please talk to the insurance adjuster, and that's it. If the employer has over 150 employees, it could be very complicated for getting this excluded, because that means everyone has to be excluded from the same thing, so there could be a problem with that. But make sure you have the letter of medical necessity and medical food exclusion removal, so it has it in layman's terms and just everything in writing, so they could read that with a prescription. Okay? And another is, what else did she mention? She said that she had problems. Anything else that you have issues with coverage, I wouldn't feel alarmed about. Again, just call me. We're here to help each other and hold each other's hand, pretty much.
Thank you again. Yes, Rainette has worked some very big miracles with the food and formula, so she is really, honestly, the best person you can go to. So next up is NextStep. It's a local nonprofit organization. They're going to give you a brief background of who they are, and then they have a panel discussion. So I'm going to turn the mic over.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Hello. Hi, I'm Keita. I'm the outreach coordinator at NextStep. You're going to hear a lot more from me in a little bit, and my lovely young person over here, Katie. We're here to talk about transition and all the good, the bad, the ugly, and the beautiful things that happen when you're going through transition from a young person to an adult. A lot of times when you're a young person, you feel isolated, you feel angry, you feel a mix of emotions, even as an average young person, right? But then when you add that layer of illness, everything is 10 times more. So when you're a young person, you feel like you don't have anywhere to go. Our amazing person over here, Bill, created NextStep, which is a place for us to go where we can build our community, we can do mentorship with people like us and older adults, and also music, which we're very into. I'm gonna just give it over to Bill.
Okay, thanks, Keita. So I'm gonna
gonna just kind of set things up, and then I'm gonna get out of the way because these two are the experts on transition, and they'll introduce themselves a little bit more as we move into it. But I want to just set the table a little bit about what Next Step is. So as you can see, our mission is to shatter the limitations and elevate the aspirations of teens and young adults that are living with serious illness. And just a tiny bit of history. We were born at the Hole in the Wall Gang Camp, which is a summer camp for kids between the ages of 7 and 15 that have serious illness. And I worked there through the decade of the 90s and realized that as these kids turned 15 or 16 years old, this wonderful, amazing support system that gave them the opportunity to kind of explore being just a kid evaporated and went away. And there was a serious sense of loss for a lot of these young people as they moved into a part of their life where they really needed that support and that backing to figure out who exactly they were. And then as we dug in a little bit deeper, and as everybody in this room knows very well, that's not the only support system that tends to evaporate at that time of life, whether it's transitioning out of your pediatric care system, transitioning out of your primary education system, transitioning out of your home perhaps, transitioning into new friends. All of these things happen kind of all at once. And I was fortunate enough to work with Paul Newman at that point, and we piloted some programs, and we gave it a shot. We had a bunch of young people that came in, and we ran some programs that were very camp-like, and we ran some programs that were very conference-like in order to have that fun and community as well as that opportunity for really moving forward on some life skills. And we squished them together into one amazing event. We called it a campference, half camp, half conference. Got it? Yes, good. And it was really successful. We had a blast, and we laughed a lot, and we did, dance parties and stage night, and we had some art projects, but we also talked about sex, drugs, and rock and roll. We got into it. We talked about what it's like to transition to a different school, or what do you need to know when you apply for a job, and you've got hospital stays perhaps that have taken away from your resume. I mean, all of those real things that most people don't really get into. We got into it, and we found experts, and one of the things that we learned early on was that our primary experts were really in our community, because as they came together, Keita, let's move the slides forward. As they came together, the first thing that we realized was that teenagers and young adults really aren't that scary. However, that's, when you're working with kids, sometimes you see teens as a little bit scary, or you're a parent of a young child and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't wait for the teenage years. In my own life, having my kids be little, I can't tell you how many times I heard, well, just wait till they're teenagers, with a finger wag. And I was lucky enough to find a group of people that really enjoy being around teenagers, and that kind of amazing time of life where everything is about discovery, and it's all brand new, and it's all about how they kind of feel and how they want to be. So pulling together that group of people to really create this program, and then letting these young people kind of dictate what it is and how it is that we do it was the secret formula for us to really create these positive environments. And that's the key when you're working with young people, is if you put them in an environment that is positive, that feels like there is possibility, and it feels like that they're in a sense where they can kind of celebrate their successes as well as talk about the amazing opportunities of their failures, then you win. Then you get out of the way, and you let them form positive relationships with each other that are based on that feeling in the room, and then suddenly they're talking about and having positive experiences. And that's the essence of positive youth development, which is the academic way that it's been studied and formulated. You can read articles about positive youth development, but really it's just about building a room where they can be themselves and they can feel good about being themselves, the good, the bad, and the ugly, as Keita put it. And beautiful, yes. So we have 3 stages to our youth as they kind of progress through our program. And the first piece is really discovery. They discover this community that helps them to feel like they're okay in their own skin. There's other people that are around them that are dealing with the same kind of issues that they are, whether it's a metabolic issue, whether it's an issue of some kind of learning disability, or whether it's about ambulation, or whether it's about the fact that they're really tall, or whether it's about the fact that they don't have a car. All these things, they can find opportunities to connect with their peers. And the principal thing that's important is that they're not identified by their illness and what separates them from their well peers. So they have this thing in common, so it almost becomes part of the specialness of who they are within the context of this relationship. And with that discovery, often they're able to look beyond their diagnosis and to what's possible. And they begin to have interactions and dialogues with their friends that have maybe gotten that first job, or that actually did go out on a date last week, or that have dealt with, food issues at college for the first time. And they can have conversations with them, and they can realize, maybe I can do this. Maybe there are questions that I can ask and get answered. And maybe I'm a resource on something that that person might be looking at. So once they discover all of that, they begin to ask those questions and develop very specific skills. And they start to look for resources. They can set goals with that new kind of, as the curtain gets pulled back for what's possible, they can start to set goals and develop those skills. And then we hope, as those skills are developed, as they, what we like to call fail forward, because that's kind of what young adulthood is all about, is it's not about figuring out what you're awesome at. Oftentimes, many of the most poignant lessons that you go through are figuring out what you're not capable of. And that can be really difficult, unless you can create an environment where that failure is really to be celebrated. Failing forward and saying, what have we learned from this, and moving on to the next thing, and either trying that again or trying something that leverages what you learned in that effort, in that attempt, is really an important piece of the discovery step. As you move into delivery, you've got something that you have the confidence and you feel the competence around to really become the teacher, become the expert, to move forward and share what you've done and what your process has been. So we take folks through that process, sometimes over and over and over again, for individual skills. It could be for maybe being away from home for the first time and independent and making your own decisions as a 16, 17, or 18-year-old. Or it may be going to that first job interview. Like, that's the opportunity to really deliver on something, because you've discovered that you want to give that a shot. You've developed all the skills necessary. You went out and you bought the perfect outfit, and you go out and you have that job interview. You're not going to get the job every time. So then we get to go back to the community again and say, I didn't do that. Does this mean that I'm a failure and that I should never do it again? And if that positive community is in place, then they're able to say, nope, I got my driver's test 4 times before I passed. And they can find their opportunity to either celebrate that based on kinship with somebody else that maybe had a struggle to get through it, or they can be inspired by somebody that said, this is what I did to be able to fix it the next time that I did it. So that's kind of our program in essence. Is the next one the, yes. So I want to just take a minute and have you take a look at, now we have an agenda here as well, because we run these things called conferences every summer. And anyone between the ages of 16 and 24 with homocystinuria is eligible for our conference. Our program works with kids from 16 to 29, and I call them kids because I'm really old, so they're not. They're teens and young adults. But our program runs from 16 to 29. Our 25 to 29-year-olds, generally we look at as leaders for some of our younger kids, and we want to really create an atmosphere of empowered youth leadership. So all of our programs are informed by young people like you see in front of you. And Kita actually has been on our staff now for a couple of years, and she is bringing a ton of knowledge. About half of our staff are members of the communities to which they work with. And I think more than half of our volunteers are from that arena as well. So if you know somebody between 16 and 24, the first thing that's going to be available to them is July, help me? July 19th to the 22nd of this summer, we have a conference that's happening in Ashland, Massachusetts, at the Warren Conference Center. And we have a little video to kind of give you a sense for what our conferences are like. And I believe that Katie is pictured in this many times, so fired up.
Never once have I been a part of a group that is as supportive, as caring, as loving.
Being here, people could relate to everything you've been going through.
I don't feel different anymore. I feel like part of the community.
A lot of times we all walk around in the world and we feel like, oh, we're the only one. And this is a place where you get to come and you get to meet a lot of other young people who are pretty much in the same place. And that bond, that friendship, the coolest thing I've ever seen.
It's been one of the greatest experiences I've ever had in my life. The connections I've forged with people have made each conference absolutely unforgettable.
There's an age gap with people around my age, and they're really looking for fun things to do. And this provides a wonderful social environment, so it does mean a lot to me and the other people, because it provides a chance that we may not have had otherwise to forge friendships and work on social skills.
About 15 years ago in 2001, we realized that there was nothing out there for teenagers and young adults that were working hard against these really crappy diseases. So we decided to start NextStep. And we've been around the country, we've been around the world running these really fun programs to get and realize that they're not alone. And more recently, we've discovered that that's the beginning of the journey. We want to have them discover this sense of themselves and then continue to develop in this community that's really safe and fun and allows them to take their own next step towards what they want to be.
Because that savings is going to give you kind of a base of support for yourself financially in the future.
Yeah, we try to not sugarcoat anything either. So next step, we will cover what it's like to look for a job, what it's like to deal with peer pressure and your friends and drinking and drugs, what it's like to deal with relationships and sex and reproductive health, what it's like to learn how to cook for the first time. Just everything, pretty much you can think of, we're going to try and figure out how to help and how to direct you.
The other thing that you get to do when you come to a Next Step program is you get to have fun. Seriously, fun. Because I get the whole thing where you're like, there's like recreational fun for a kid, which is great. But at some point you get to be like, that's not enough. Like, I need some information. So this is fun plus information. If I can put it another way, it's information plus making giant water balloon launchers that you launch at people.
We do that?
Yeah.
So let's do the I can make every moment last one into that.
I get to be the person who's right next to these beautiful people who are taking these risks to step back into life, to decide what life is going to be, and to choose which fight is the one that matters to them.
Paint a picture of your life. Let's turn it on, turn on that light. Adding in my own true colors, learning how to draw outside the lines. What do I feel in black and white? I get stuck in my heart, get stuck in my head, stuck in every insecurity. Just trying to be me, trying to be me. Yeah.
If you want to be a part of a community that is, outstanding in every aspect and is willing to both inspire you and be inspired by you, do it.
Just like if you come next year and I'm here,
having two.
It's where it's at.
The bed all the way near the bathroom.
That's mine.
On the right side is mine. Just kidding, I'll give it up.
The last thing that I would say, you need to show up because it'll be worth it. You're going to have a blast. You're going to find people that really care, so get over here. Thank you. That's very nice. But we also, we don't like to do presentations that don't kind of involve the opportunity to have ruthless competition. So you and your table mates are going to get the opportunity to win fabulous prizes throughout our presentation. So how many people in here know who Bob Eubanks is? Come on, I know there's some of us in here. So he had the greatest game show ever called Card Sharks. I absolutely loved it. We're not going to get to do the full kind of Card Sharks where you flip the cards because that's a little too exciting for my aging heart. But we're going to do, on your table, you're going to get the opportunity to answer a question and win fabulous prizes by the time it's all done. So here's an example. Wait a minute. Sorry, I need my glasses. All right, for example, I'm going to ask one table to give me a number and take a guess on what the answer to this question is, and then the rest of you will get the opportunity to say whether the actual answer is higher or lower than the answer that was given, okay? And if you win, or if you are correct, you get a point towards the ultimate prize, which is unspeakably wonderful. Okay, so here is an example of the question. We asked 100 people, have you ever had such a great dream that you tried to go back to sleep just to see how it would turn out? So we asked 100 people that. So I'm going to ask Katie what number she thinks the answer, out of 100 people, how many people do you think answered yes, that they have tried to go back to sleep to see how it turns out, out of 100?
Well, I'd say I've done it before, so probably at least 75 people.
75 is her answer. So on your table, with your table, figure out whether you think the actual answer, that is not quite it, is higher or lower than that number. It's very close, though. That's a great guess.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, you'll have 7 seconds to figure it out. Okay. So now, when I count to 3, as a table, work it out, people. You can do it. This is all about community building, right? You will have one answer. All of the people on your table will either put a thumbs up for higher, put a thumbs down for lower, okay? And you will hold it there, and then you will be rewarded with your token of how many points you will have, hopefully by the end. I hope we don't run out. So, ready? 1, 2, 3. All right. If you said higher, keep your thumb up because you win. The actual answer is 92. There's a duck for you. There's a duck for you. There's a duck for you. Ready? There's a duck for you. Okay, keep track of your ducks because this is how we're going to know who's going to win. Dang it, there's too many winners. We're going to run out. Here we go. Ready? And there you go. Really? Okay. It's you. Okay, who else? For you. For you. Okay, we need a harder question next time, clearly. Anybody else who did not get theirs that was a winner? Okay. Nice. Is that it? Okay, good job. We'll have a couple more questions like that as we move through. Now I'm not going to talk anymore.
That was very exciting. Just to kind of bounce back off of what we do at NextStep, we really try and hold this space. So as a young person with a rare genetic disorder and also as a staff person, I have the wonderful opportunity to bounce between the two roles I have, the hats I wear. But it is a really cool, and I'll let Katie also talk about this, but how we set it up, but then we get out of the way for the young people to do what needs to be done. Would you say that's correct?
Absolutely. They have this sorry. They have this excellent way of giving us the most perfect setup. Like every time, I think like, oh, maybe they're just gonna leave it there, but no, they always set it up perfectly, and they give us this excellent starter, and they just let us take it and run with it.
Yeah, thank you. And we're always talking about like topics that matter to us. We never want to talk about things that are talked ad nauseum in the doctor's office or with your friends or whatever. We actually try and talk about things that we don't often get to talk about there. So it's really cool. But back to us. So I'm Keita. I'm 29. I have a rare genetic disorder called pycnodysostiosis. It's a mouthful, so I usually just say PYKD, which some people have still never heard of. And let's see, what is the other question that I was going to ask? Oh, the first time that I realized that I had a diagnosis, that I was different, I was about in 2nd or 3rd grade, and that's when, everyone really started to grow really tall and shoot up, especially all my girlfriends in the class. And I was often on crutches, so it's a brittle bone condition that I have, and so I was always on crutches or had my arm in a sling, and I realized that not all my friends did that, and that was interesting. So that was probably the first time I realized that I had something that no one else had.
Hi, my name is Katie. It's really easy to remember because I'm Katy Perry. I'm 19 and I have PKU. The first time I recognized that I was different was my first day of preschool, when I realized none of the other kids had the same lunches as me. And initially I just wrote it off, because it's first day and I'm in preschool. I don't care. But by kindergarten, it had become apparent that, I was real different in the way that I had to eat. I always found myself feeling kind of isolated because of that. But it was just part of life for me. Yeah.
So we're going to take this next, I think we've got an hour or so. We're going to go through a few different things about transition, different topics that have really, people have had a lot of questions about, or people are wondering, and we're the experts. We've been through it, or we're currently going through it. So I think Bill has got a few questions for us, and we'll kind of reel us in if we somehow start talking about Scooby-Doo or dorm rooms, late night snacks or anything. But I really want this to be an open dialogue. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to jump up and ask us. And I'm pretty much an open book. Nothing offends me. I can't say the same about Katie, but really just ask any question you want. The 4 topics that we really wanted to talk about were school, both under high school, getting through that, and then college, if that's what people have chosen to do, then the work life, also social life, different types of relationships, both friendships, romantic relationships, family relationships, and how they change, and then also the dreaded medical transition. It's not that scary. I did it. Okay, you want to take it away with school?
Yes, I would.
If I could, I want to just set this up a little bit beforehand. Just so you know, because they're at different developmental stages as they move through these things, we know that all of this is not going to be just positive, everything is awesome. These are heroic young people that fight and battle and then ultimately win everything that they do. That sometimes is what the press or what our marketing people want us to say, but that's not the truth. So we try and stay closer to the truth. Right now, Keita is at 29. She has worked her way through her undergrad and her graduate school. And 10 years before, she was right about where Katie is now, really making that transition into college and being faced kind of up against the glass with some of the challenges that are part of that. So in setting that up, I'm going to try and set that up a little bit before each one. Katie is going to talk a little bit about what school is, but I want to give us the opportunity to win again before she really goes into the school. So this is a question about school. So the 100 people were surveyed. So they asked 100 school bus drivers, At the end of the day, have you ever finished up your route and discovered you still had one kid left over? So out of 100 school bus drivers that were asked this question, how many of them answered yes? Keita, what is your guess for out of 100?
Out of 100. Okay, I'm going to give the bus drivers the benefit of the doubt because that's why they have rear view mirrors, right? To look in the back. 23?
23. Her guess is 23. Out of 100 on your table, come up with an answer. How many of you think that the actual answer is higher than 23? You have 11 seconds to come to consensus. No. Hey, we go with what we go with, man. You are making it easy for them to win ducks, or at least the maybe, but I'm not saying. Okay. 3, 2, 1. All right, so on 3, let me see the indication from your table whether you believe the answer is actually higher or lower. 1, 2, 3. Oh, come on. If your answer was lower, put your hands down because the answer was higher. Keep your thumb up. Okay, Katie, you can go ahead and start. There's a lot of winners here, so
all right.
One for you. The right answer was 71. 71, that's right. Winner, winner. Winner, winner. Yes. Sorry. Okay.
Okay.
There you go.
Hi. Hello again. Katy Perry. Hello.
Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Emmy winner, Katy Perry. Or Grammy winner.
I don't know. So for me, school life was very similar to other kids, save for a couple of major exceptions. First and foremost that I want to talk about, I was significantly smarter than the kids in the rest of my class. Because to me, that's what was most important. It wasn't my diagnosis. The forefront of my mind wasn't, I'm going to school and I'm sick. Forefront in my mind was, I have to go to school with these idiots again. And truly, some of them were. And I don't mean to be rude, but when lunchtime came, I did dread it. I'm not gonna lie, it was tough because you get in line in public school. The cafeteria is already a war zone. You know, there's mashed potatoes flying. And the seating arrangement, there's like assigned seating, and you go in line and you have to get this special like saran wrap covered tray. And it's hard. And the biggest saving grace for me was that at my table, everybody already knew. For me, the easiest part about going to school was after the first month of, yeah, we were at summer and we kind of forgot that you were sick, sorry. Or something, there's a new kid that they sit at your table now. After the first month, at your table, you're normal. After you get past the line, after you get past those random kids who you've been going to school with for 6 years now, and they should know, I've told you at least 3 times, the questions, you're safe. And for me, the hardest part was always if one of my friends forgot. Like, what are you eating after a long summer apart, after they transferred away for a year? What are you doing? It's like, you know this. Oh no. I always found that the rest of school life was completely normal. I went to school, I had friends, I had a clique. I was not the leader of that clique. I had my little niche group that we did weird things together, and my illness wasn't the be-all, end-all of everything, but it was a huge part of my life. In the end, what was most important to me wasn't how hard it all was. I didn't spend my entire free time, I didn't spend study halls, oh, I can't go to the lunchroom, I can't do this, oh my God. No. I spent my study halls working and goofing off like any self-respecting, high schooler did. And when I went to college, that's when managing my diet got harder because they didn't hand you some saran-wrapped little tray and that's your meal for the day. You had to pick out your own food, and for the first time at school I had choices and I got to be normal. So I'm gonna admit I did go off diet a little bit, and that wasn't good for me. I actually had to drop out because of the mental health related repercussions that gave me. And it was bad. I really damaged myself, and I had to take a break. And I know now, but it was a steep learning curve for me. It will always be a part of my life, and I will never be able to escape it. It's just the facts.
Thank you, Katie. School for me was different-ish and the same. So for me, I am fairly obvious someone who has something. I stand at least 1.5 feet below my peer group, which I think is awesome. And I've always made friends with the really tall kids, which was interesting. My mom always pointed out, my best friend, she's 6'1", I think. But she could always get the tall stuff, and I could always pick up whatever she dropped, so it really worked out. But school was different. Instead of the lunchroom, I avoided gym class for many reasons. I couldn't play with the other kids because I would just shatter to a million pieces. But also, they smell. Gym clothes are gross. But I would miss a lot of school because I would break something and I'd be out for a couple weeks, or I'd have a major surgery and be out for a month, and then I'd have to catch up. And so for me, that was the hardest part. My friends were really great when they would remember that I was gone for such and such, or hootie waddy wada. But it was hard. I learned the hard way to find better friends when kids were mean. Kids can be cruel and dumb, and I mean, we were all them once, but you got to find the better people. College took me a little longer than most. I had to take half of freshman year off for a major surgery that was 5 or 6 months of recovery. So that it was kind of a bummer not to graduate with my class, but I made it through, and I can say that now, graduating with your class, that doesn't matter at all. And then I made it to grad school, and grad school was amazing. I went to BU, and I majored in public health. I have always known that I wanted to give back to my community, be an advocate for young people who feel isolated, who feel alone, who have some sort of medical diagnosis. And then it's got me to this point where I'm getting to speak in front of all of you guys. So school for me was an experience, and I'm a lifelong learner, so I still take classes because I find life so interesting and humans interesting. But yeah, I think school, that kind of, did anyone have any questions about us that we didn't answer about school, or yes?
Wait, I'm gonna play Phil Donahue. So for those of you that know Bob Eubanks, you probably know Phil Donahue.
A loud voice, that's okay. How receptive were the administrations of both high school, college, and graduate school to your particular situations?
Sure. Yep.
They were actually really amazing. What I usually did was I would just go to the lunch ladies or the cafeteria staff and say, I have a dietary restriction. Who do I need to go to see about finding an alternate meal plan? And they would direct me. They were very friendly. They were extremely receptive to my needs.
My mom was amazing at getting my, what are they called? IEP or some
504 plan or
Thank you.
IEP?
Clearly, I never did that myself. My mom was really amazing, but then when it came to college, it was like, I have to disclose that I have something every semester to a new person every time. And so there were times that I didn't tell my professors, but then I'd be out for a month because I broke something or I couldn't go out because it was too icy, and that's a risk for me. So I would disclose too late, and then they're not as sympathetic. But I realized that once I started to take ownership of what I had in my condition, and that I own it, it doesn't own me. I could tell the professor, look, I've got such and such, and there are some days that I won't be able to be in class, but I'm more than happy if I can be there virtually, or if we can work out, I'll have one of my friends be a note taker. So it really is a lot about communicating with the people, and then they're so receptive and so helpful. And the disability services at my school was amazing. They would got a note taker when I knew I was going to be out, and again, just all about communicating.
Oh boy, you guys are going to make me run back and forth. I love that. Getting my steps in.
So if you were to give people advice for kind of high school moving to college, and the things that you wish you knew and the things that people told you that you ignored, and the things that you discovered on your own that someone you wish would say, what would 2 or 3 of those things be?
Well, for me, no one is going to manage your diet for you. You don't have a parent there saying, you've already had 2 cheese slices today. You can't have another one. You've already gone over your limit, Katie. Come on. You know this. You've got nobody pestering you. You know? Because I really relied on that. I don't think I knew as much as I thought I did, how heavily I relied on it. And the second thing is what Keita was saying. You need to communicate with the staff, with the people about your disability, because the first semester I didn't tell any of the cafeteria staff that I had PKU. Nobody knew. I was trying to manage it all on my own, and that was such a mistake.
So I am originally from Salt Lake City, Utah, and I moved to Boston for graduate school. And for me, moving across the country, I suddenly had to find a whole new team of doctors, and that was it was scary. I originally talked to my team that I had in Utah, and I said, I'm going to Boston. Luckily, Boston's amazing, and it's got great medical care, so well done, Boston. And so it made it a little easier to have the doctors from Utah on my team, so that once I reached out, they were also reaching out to the doctors out here. And so knowing that I had somewhere to go to, and I tell young people, and literally anyone, that have a plan in play before it's an emergency, because that's when you're like 3 a.m. and you're sick and you don't know where you're going to go. That's not the time to figure out where and if they take your insurance and how far it is to get there and blah, blah, blah. So having the plan in play beforehand was huge for me.
And one of the big, I think, consistencies for colleges across the country, and obviously, like any institution, some are better than others, but they want to help you to wean yourself from the pestering. So I think that college is one of those systems that was set up to be a transition, thankfully. So, but for somebody who has a serious medical condition, particularly a metabolic condition, you need to get your team in place beforehand. And as Katie said, and it's something that we've talked about, trying to get your team in place while you're actually struggling with it independently and discovering all of these things that you never did for yourself or you didn't do without the pestering can be very difficult. So that's one of the principal things that we say to young people is get your team in place first, as soon as you get there, and use the people that are working there, particularly in the disabilities office, because they want to know you. That's what justifies their position. So they're psyched when you walk into their office. And again, this is for the most part.
One of the things that Krista talked about earlier when she was talking about best diet practices and so forth was, and Dr. Kimberly Chapman had jumped in saying that, you know, by 15, 16, 17, you should start transitioning to be more independent. So college just didn't knock you off your feet and be like, oh, I wasn't prepared for this. It's all about building those things into your schedule. So when you get to college, it's not this new experience. You should have that independence. And I know for parents, it's really scary, but it's essential. It's essential that you have those independent skills before you get to that point, because there's already enough pressure without knowing how to handle your formula on your own, how to order your foods, and where to go and what to do. So it starts at home, and then it makes it an easier transition in college. Not saying it will be easy, but it will be a lot easier. So.
Agreed. Start early. And one of the things that we've discovered with all of the different groups that we work with, the idea of medical transition particularly, it's an arbitrary number that nobody really knows exactly what it is depending on what your physical issues or your emotional issues or your medical issues are. But you can't start too early with giving responsibilities and giving positive feedback for those responsibilities being carried out. And be the support system, be the safety net, because eventually that safety net's not going to be there. So I want to keep an eye on the clock. We'll come back to questions at the end if you think of any good school questions that you want to make sure you get to, but I want to move on to work and the work environment and give you a chance quickly to win something. So this is my work question. So we asked 100 dentists. They chose dentistry as their profession. And there are consequences to choosing your profession. We asked 100 dentists, has anyone ever asked you to look at their teeth while at a party? Out of 100 dentists, how many of them said, yes, that has happened to me? Out of 100 dentists. Katie, what do you think the number is out of 100?
I have no idea, so I'm going to say 50%.
50 out of 100 said, yes, someone has asked me to look at their teeth right after they took a big swig of beer at a party. Okay, you have 6 seconds. Okay, so on 3, tell me what your table has decided. 1, 2, 3. Higher, lower, higher, 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 higher. Okay, all of you that said higher, the actual number is 91. We're going to run out of ducks, man. Okay, keep this finger up. Thank you very much. Even if you did say lower, keep this. No, if you're lower, put your finger down. But for those of you that are higher, I will come around while Kita begins to talk about the idea of getting a job and keeping a job.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm chatting about my own experience, and it's similar to some of our other participants and some of my friends with different conditions. So I knew that because of my diagnosis, I had to only work in certain avenues. I had to find my limitations kind of the hard way. When I was a kid, I really wanted to be a paleontologist. For whatever reason, I loved dinosaurs, and Jurassic Park was my favorite movie as a kid. But then I realized field work was not in my books because I couldn't be bent over for hours at a time in one 3-inch section brushing. That would destroy my back. So I then found through school, through other means, I found that I really liked to work with people, with young people especially. And I knew that I didn't want a desk job. So I have this, with my condition, I have to be active, but I can't be too active. So I knew a desk job would also be a detriment to my health, but also too much activity is a detriment. So luckily, I found NextStep. But I always knew that I needed to work with young people in various avenues, and so knowing what I had to do made focusing on school a little easier, because I knew that if I completed this, then I could get the job I wanted. I could never be a construction worker. That wasn't in the cards. Yeah, I think that's kind of And it's hard though. I will say I've had odd jobs here and there, and when you're at a job, you still have to disclose what your needs are. I was a bank teller for about a year, and 3 days into the job, I had to ask my boss for a step stool because I realized if I got off my chair, suddenly the counter was right here. And trying to hand money over doesn't really work as well. So just little things like that I never really thought that I needed, but something I had to advocate for. It was an interesting experience, asking for step stools, asking for breaks so that I could do my PT, my stretches. It is interesting to have to disclose so many times, but you get better at it. And then now it's like, oh yeah, I break a lot, so help me out.
My resume is pretty limited as I've only recently entered the workforce, but I have never met a job that my metabolic disorder has interfered with. I mean, I know I'm never going to be an ice cream taste tester, but I haven't met a job that I couldn't do because of my illness. I mean, I have met jobs I couldn't do, but not for the reason of I'm ill. If anyone asks me about the lunches that I bring or why my bread looks weird, I'm very honest with them. I'm frank with them, and it doesn't really affect much aside from the social aspect. That some people are a little weirded out by it, but that's just them, and they're honestly disqualifying themselves for you.
There you go. That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
Yes.
How do you handle formula in the workplace? Because I know a lot of adults do struggle trying to feel like, oh, I'll take it only for breakfast, and then it starts to crash. I know that from experience, but how do you handle that?
Personally, I refer to it as just medicine in the workplace. Nobody is going to dispute you if you call it medicine. Oh yeah, this is my medicine. Oh, she can't be without that. It's immediately their priority as well as yours. Because of the fact that I call it medicine, people make it out to be a much bigger deal than it is. That is a side effect. They will be like, do you need this with you? Do you need this with you? And I'm like, chill, I need it on my lunch. But aside from that, it's really not a big issue as long as you refer to it at least once as your medicine. And every now and then remind them, yeah, this is my medicine, I need this. This is not optional. Then in that case, there will be no issue. Because everyone understands the word medicine. Not everyone gets formula, not everyone gets, my drink, my whatever. Everyone understands medicine point blank. Anyone else?
So can you guys talk a little bit about pre-job as you're interviewing for those jobs? I mean, Keita, you interviewed with me, so probably shouldn't talk about that too much because I'm sensitive. But your other jobs, whether it's just getting, if it is your career or isn't your career, how does the illness, the diagnosis come into your mind as you're interviewing for that position? And are you preparing yourself for questions that might come up around accommodations during the interview as you're moving towards the job?
I'm going to let Keita take point on this.
So one thing that I really struggled with when I started to apply for jobs was even applying. There's this little checkbox that you can click for if you have a disability. And so for a while I was like, no, please, I don't have one. It's just if I break something or something happens, I don't want to. And then I was like, wait, certain companies need a certain amount of people that have disabilities. So if I click this, I might get that leg up in the interview. Again, they're not allowed to really ask any serious questions or direct questions about it. And often I think it's only HR knows that I've clicked the disability box, but I did grapple with that question of do I check it, do I not? And then finally I was like, yes, I check it. Because also if I do have anything, then I know that they know and we've talked about it. But interviewing has been interesting because there's some gaps in my resume, and even in my CV, there's a gap because I had to take time off, and people have asked questions about that. And I've found that there's a very fine line of being honest and too honest, because I don't ever want to scare my employer that I'm unreliable. And that's been an interesting line to discover. I believe that I haven't gotten many jobs just because and I know they can't actually say that because that's illegal, but because they're worried that I wouldn't be on the job as much as someone who didn't have a diagnosis. But I've always been honest and say, you know, I'm really loyal. I am here. I'm going to work from home if I have to. I'm dedicated to this job. But it is something that does come up, and every job is different, every employer is different, and I always make sure when I'm in the interview that I'm interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing me, because it's all about the fit of the job. I don't want to work somewhere that I'm miserable. They probably don't want to have an employee that's miserable. So I always try and flip the frame of, in this interview, it's all about whether we both mesh.
I don't really consider my disorder much when I go for a job, because it is restricted to meal times. And I sort of consider my lunches off the company's, time. It's my time. So I oftentimes don't even think about it, because unless they're a company that's big on having, company lunches or something, it's not really going to come up. Because, again, you tell them about, you have your formula that you need to have with you. You tell them about, I need to have special accommodation for my lunches or something like that if you do need that. And that's the end of it. I have never experienced any time when I would need more than that small amount of accommodation.
Here I come.
So I'm going to assume at this point you're still on your parents' insurance?
I am, yes.
Okay. So it may change a bit once you're applying for jobs where you will be the one as the insured. That might change your thoughts and questions at that point.
Yes, I imagine so.
Kita, can you speak to that a little bit as you have transitioned?
Yeah, I will say when I turned 27, the little single tear shed that I had to get off my parents' insurance. But luckily I did find a job that I knew, because I have to have specialists, I had to get something that the insurance would also, I didn't have to go through all the, you guys know the hoops and leaps and bounds you have to go through to get a specialist and then to pre-approved and blah, blah, blah. So when I was applying for jobs, it was often looking at bigger companies that I knew had better insurance for their employees, which is not always the most thrilling jobs, and if what you will, but it definitely was a factor. Every time I applied for a job was, what are their insurance benefits and all that.
And generally, from an employer standpoint, that's a conversation that will come up beyond the actual initial interview, unless it's something that you want to get a sense for what the HR department is like as you even begin. You may want to do your research on the HR department if it's a bigger company, or if it's a smaller company, what would their flexibility be? But that's a discussion that, in our experience, usually happens down the road after they have made a decision about you and you're checking out what the benefits are. And that's part of the negotiation for what the job is, which is, again, all about fit, as Kita put out there.
Yeah, I can just piggyback on that. I was going to say, I think legally they actually can't ask you about that during the interview process. They can't even ask you your age. So there are certain things that you're protected while you're interviewing. Then again, it all happens afterward. That's all I was going to say. You are protected. You don't have to disclose that when you're in the interview process, which protects you.
Right. And the beautiful thing is that I think, as Kita put out, as an employer of, again, as I said, 50% of my staff, or just over right now, are dealing with serious medical conditions, and we're kind of a small shop. So being able to accommodate all those various needs for insurance, in-network, out-of-network, creating something that's viable and being in the industry that we're in, I know that it gets complicated from the employer standpoint as well. So what we tell our youth all the time is do your homework. And don't be afraid to actually call the HR department if it's a bigger company and ask an anonymous question before you go in for the interview and know whether this is a fit that is even a possibility. It's not a bad thing to do.
I was just going to add that one thing that I've done is actually bring it up early in the interview process, but frame it as if I'm not just focused on pay. So you know, they tend to like employees that are focused on the full benefits package. So if you can ask for, you know, you might want to do it for a range of things, but ask for a copy of the health plan, copy of maybe life insurance if you're interested. Just get kind of a set of benefits and take a look at them. You can at least start to get an idea of what you're dealing with at that corporation.
Any other work questions? Okay, let's move on to the social life. So what is it like to independently begin to develop your social life as a young person stepping out on their own or trying to kind of create their own life? So of course I have to have a question. Here's my question for this one. Now forgive me, these are old questions, so some of them are very kind of gender specific, and but we want to be also, we want to give you a sense for what some of these young people are thinking about, perhaps as they move into their independent living at college and so on. So we asked 100 college fraternities. Right now, in your room, is there an empty beer can? Out of 100 fraternities, men in fraternities, how many said yes? Out of 100, how many said, yes, there is at least one empty beer can in my room? Kita, I will let you take a shot at this one.
I'm going to go with 89.
89. Okay. Do you believe that the actual answer is higher or lower than 89? Okay, you have 4 seconds. Time's a wasting. And I'm almost running out of ducks, so if any of you could please be wrong, I'd appreciate it. So her answer is 89. Do you believe it's higher or lower? 1, 2, 3. What's your answer? Okay. Everybody's got their answer up. So those of you that said higher, you're wrong. So the actual answer is 66. See, we don't have faith in our young people nowadays. I don't know. So you guys are lower. Who else is lower? Over there, I'm throwing it. Here you go. Lower. Oh, you didn't? I think I'm running out. So you're going to have to figure out how to count anyway. Anybody else who was lower? Good. Thank goodness, because... Okay, I think this is my... Okay, here, it's coming. Long distance. Ready? That's all I got. You two? You guys won? Oh, last time. Okay. We're going to have to figure out how to count differently from now on. Okay, so moving on to social life. Let's talk about what it's like to start making those decisions on your own as a young person.
Hello. So I have found that as I've transitioned from having most of my plans made for me to making my own plans, that I actually prefer to take point in like figuring out where we meet up. Because of my dietary restrictions, I like to be in control in that stage of planning. I prefer, if we're going to go out, that we go somewhere, you know, vegan, organic, somewhere that's particularly, I'm going to say young, if you understand what I mean there. Because older businesses like McDonald's and such don't tend to have menus that cater to us. So what I prefer is I let my friends decide, you know, what kind of place they want to go to, what kind of feel they want, and then I decide where we're going. I take control on that one. I research, I do what I have to do, but my friends have come to know I have final say on where we go. So, because of my my illness, I find that they're a lot more willing and receptive to allow me to have final say. Because I feel like if you just waltz in and just go, I want to go here and I don't care what you say, they're just going to be like, why? Who are you? You know, if you waltz in and go, okay, I have an illness and I would prefer if we went here, they're going to be a lot more receptive, and you do have to give context, of course, but I feel like the more you communicate in any situation, the better things go off. Communication is key in everything. And I feel like it goes very similar in dates. I prefer to plan the date myself. I recently had a significant other who, preferred to plan the dates out and made me real uncomfortable because I had no idea where we were going and I had no idea if I could eat anything there. Taking the control out of my hands really made me uncomfortable. So for people who have children of, or who you want to give them as much control as you can over where you go. Like, that is one thing I do want to say. You think about the menu before you think about anything else. Give them as much control as you can.
For me, it was more about physical activities. So one example was prom. For the activity, they all wanted to go go-kart racing as my group, which I was like, oh my gosh, awesome. And then I was like, wait, I need to call the place. And you had to be 4'10", and I'm 4'5", and I was like, nah. And so I was like, no, you guys can totally go, but I have amazing friends. And so they're like, please, if you can't go, we won't go. So we changed our whole plan that day to do a different activity. I can't remember we did, I think, go to the zoo or something. But yeah, for me, it was all about what physical activities we were doing. And socially, like growing up, I always knew I had to be careful. I wasn't always careful. I definitely did backflips off the swings, which resulted in fractures, went skiing, which wasn't smart. I learned the hard way a lot in what I can and can't do. And then I did have to learn my limits that way, which I thank my parents over and over and over again that they let me find my own limits instead of putting me in a bubble. And I will have consequences later in life because they didn't put me in a bubble, but I'll deal with those when I have to. But dating is hard, especially as a little person trying to be in that kind of social environment. I have very attractive friends, and so I was always the funny one, which I am funny, so that's fine. But it was hard. It was awkward. I never felt like I could flirt. I would try my best moves, my funniest jokes, and still they would ask for my friend's number. So it's tricky. But then, I avoided dating a lot of schmucks, so I'm happy about that. I'm trying to think of other social things. I'm going to open it up to questions, because this, I think, I'm better at answering than coming up with material.
So I have a question, if I could, really quickly. I think that you guys both have talked about kind of experiential learning, and that, from a parent's perspective, is also incredibly frightening when they're outside of your purview. And some of that experiential learning that we imagine in our overactive brains while you're gone, maybe an hour, 5 hours, 15 minutes away, but you're not with us, is some of the decision making around the dark underbelly of the social life. So when you're in a community and the community is headed in a direction that you know you shouldn't go-kart race is very benign, but what if it's drugs or alcohol? Or if it's, everybody wants to go to the pizza house and you want to just fit in. So what are some of those moments like, and how can you reassure, I guess, your care providers or your parents that decision-making process is, although it's normal for a young person to kind of go through those, being able to fail and then learn, in some instances you can't get back what you lose. So what's that like?
Do you have an example offhand? Sure. So I grew up in a household that we talked about everything, which I know that made my parents squirm at times, but I am so thankful for it now. There are instances that my mom always said, if you're at a party and you're uncomfortable, you can call or text me and say that you left something in the dryer and that she'd be on her way. So I always had a code word with my mom. If I ever got in a situation that I knew was uncomfortable, but I didn't want to say, like, my friends, I'm uncomfortable, can you take me home? I knew I had a way out. Or I had my older cousins, I had friends, I had aunts and uncles that I knew I could reach out to. So always having a plan in place made me feel comfortable. I think it made my parents comfortable to know that if I ever did feel that I was in a situation that I shouldn't be in, that they could come and grab me. I'm trying to think of something that I did but isn't so bad so that I can put you guys assured. But I don't know, do you have anything right now?
What I have is not so much an example as it is.
Because remember, your mom is in the audience. So
I know. Hi, Mom. It's nothing bad, I promise. What I have is, I think I spent most of my life attached to the hip of my sister. So my sister made all the decisions. We would go out with her friends, and what Liz wanted more than anything was not to have our disorder. What Liz wanted more than anything was to fit in. So if we went to a Pizza Hut, we were going to Pizza Hut. And I think living next to that for a long time made me realize I need to talk about this. Because I cannot count the amount of times we went out and I just had salad and fries. Salad and fries is my restaurant food. If I can't have anything, I can have salad and fries. The most aggravating thing is going out with your friends every day for a week, and every day for a week you eat salad and fries. And they all had pizza and Italian, and you had salad and fries. And the next day you had salad and fries. And the next day. And I think that really taught me that you do need to advocate for yourself. You do need to talk, and you need to let yourself have that final say. Because I remember the thing that I was most afraid of as a kid was being too bossy. I didn't want to be too, well, I'm the one here, and I'm the only one whose opinion mattered because I have this special thing about me that makes me so special, and I'm going to say that we're going to the vegan cafe in the weird part of town. I did not want to be that kind of person. I think what really sold it for me, though, was watching my sister just go, okay, to every restaurant that anyone wanted to go to, because that was just awful. Yes, for clarity, my sister does have PKU as well. I'm sorry, I didn't clarify that. Because the most important thing was that we were together. My sister and I have our differences, but we were together, and that's one thing that I'll never have on single children is I had a partner in it. And I will say that I always had that sense of community, and I think that really helped. You always want to find someone to have a sort of camaraderie with.
I also want to say out loud for all the parents is that everyone I've talked to who's like in my age group, we all have that one point that we realize mom was right or dad was right. Like, oh no, they were right. And then not all of us have gotten to the point where we thank our parents, but I did reach out to my mom. I was like, Mom, you were right. Thank you for teaching me that even if you didn't think I was listening, or you thought that I was going against the grain in everything you told me, some of it's sunk in, and now I know how much like she knew better than I did. And so I just want you guys to all know that at some point, hopefully, every one of the kids will have that moment of their parents was right. They might not always admit it, though.
So can I ask a good question? You've talked about how good your friends are, and you've talked about your sister. Do either of you guys have somebody like a social buddy who knows when they can help you get out of a situation? I know you talked a little bit about your mother and the words, but like somebody in your social group that knows you well enough, that knows you're in a situation that you need a bail excuse. So, you know, I'm not sure this is a great idea, and it's not because they don't think it's a great idea for them, it's because they don't think it's a great idea for you, just so that you have a backup.
I have actually made very certain to surround myself with people who can all help me this way, because I don't want to be in a situation with someone who doesn't have my back. I think of it less as I have this one friend who knows me really well and knows me when I have to leave, and more of it as, do I want to be stuck like in a car for 6 hours with someone who doesn't know when I'm uncomfortable? Do I want to be stuck at a restaurant with someone who doesn't know that I can't eat anything here and we need to change restaurants? I don't want to be stuck with someone who doesn't care enough to put in that much effort for me. So I always make sure to stay around friends who can do that for me. I have this group of friends, they're beautiful people, and I've been friends with them since I was preschool, like younger, some of them. And they all know exactly like where I can go, what I can do. One of their first questions when we all want to go out is, can Katie eat anything? And I feel like you have to build that environment for yourself. You have to make sure and be your own advocate, and you have to make sure that you have people that you'd be okay with planning how to go to eat, no matter how uncomfortable that is. You have to be okay with, you know, saying, I can't do that. That's the most important thing for me, because that's what, for me, was the hardest, was learning how to say, I can't do that.
And for me, one of the hardest lessons I had to learn was the people who matter and who will be the best in your life will stay in your life. And so finding the people that were kind of wishy-washy, but I really wanted to be friends with them, or I really just wanted to hang out and I wanted them as my buddy, but they weren't always the right people. I had to learn how to let them go, and that was an interesting experience. But now I know that the people I've surrounded myself with, just like Katie was saying, that they have my best intentions and they're always looking out for me. They've told me not to jump off the high dive when I needed to be told that. But yeah, learning who's there for you and who will come in and out, it was a learning experience for sure.
And I can say these are two pretty dynamic and charismatic young women as far as advocating for themselves. I think there's an extension of that question to somebody who is creating a new social environment because they have moved independently to college, or they've moved into a different city, or whatever it might be, and that there are some insecurities or some questions about at what time do I advocate so I can still make friends, but now I know that these friends have my back. If I put that right out front, then it's going to, are they going to like me? These two ladies are pretty strong about take me as I am or leave me be. But I know that there are a lot of young people that we have worked with that's a struggle, is when to make that switch. It's just like the interview at the job. When do you ask about the HR benefits? It's the same thing with friends. When do you start to advocate for yourself to say, you know what? This is a little bit different about me. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts about that.
I actually do, because as a kid, I moved schools 3 times. And during the first move was in middle school, and that was fun. So during that move, I went from underfunded public school to a rich kid's private school. And that was a transition and a half during middle school, which was a transition and a half in and of itself. So altogether, 3 transitions. But what ended up happening was I didn't advocate for myself at all, because at that point I wasn't the charismatic, the, confident, the take me or leave me person. I was a middle schooler. I was, oh God, they all notice that I have acne. They all know that I'm weird. They all know that this, that blah, 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 all middle schoolers. I was a middle schooler. And the most important thing about me then was my disorder, because it was the most forefront social anxiety thing that I could think of.
That's easy to when you have something that's an easy thing to attach yourself to, like, oh, I have a diagnosis. Whenever someone's asking, like, what are 3 things about you? Like, it's very easy to be like, oh, I have a diagnosis. So it's one thing to attach yourself to the diagnosis, and then you have to learn how to unattach yourself and figure out who you are as a person, and then who you are as someone with a diagnosis, not your diagnosis.
Yeah, I remember that transition, and that was, oof. But what I had done then was I let people come to me. I didn't actively go out and, I'm going to make friends because I'm a social person. I'm an introvert, and I was in middle school. I know I'm saying that a lot, but I don't think you understand. Yeah. Middle school is really hard, and I let people come to me. Now, the good thing about me is I'm magnetic. People do like to come and talk to me, so a lot of people did come and talk to me. Unfortunately, that meant a lot of flaky people came and talked to me. So I had a lot of really flaky, really fake friends during middle school. And the way that I dealt with that was I barely talked to them. I didn't make a lot of plans. We were friends in school, and then we weren't once, the school bell rang. I had 2 or 3 friends that I talked to after school, and they were good friends of mine. And the way that I handled that was I had 2 or 3 friends in a classroom that knew when things were getting too personal, that knew when things were a little too real, and knew how to pull me out. And that was very tough for me, because I went from having this beautiful group of friends who every single one of them knew my disorder, my needs, my issues, my little quirks that make Katie Katie. I went from that to I have 2 people in an entire classroom who will care enough to notice when I'm on on the knife's edge. And that was a difficult transition. But what made it bearable was those 2 people. Because no matter what, you will find at least one person who cares enough about you. I want to reassure everyone in the crowd. You will find at least one person who cares enough. What you have to do is you have to reciprocate and find them and care enough about them as well. Because if you're absorbed in your own issues, if you're, too absorbed in your own issues, I'm not saying you can't be absorbed. We all have to be. But if you're too absorbed in yourself and your own issues, you can't look outside and see that other people are caring for you, that they're trying to help you, that you're trying to extend a hand. If you're too in your own head, you can't see that. And that's the only thing that I really want to impress upon you right now, is you will find someone. You have to get out of your own head and see that for yourself. And I'm going to hand this over.
Okay. Well done, you.
Thank you.
Where's Bill?
Hi, I'm Katie's mom.
Hi,
and
Katie's mom.
What I want to say is it wasn't easy as a mom. watching all that from the sidelines. And a lot of times my husband, her dad had to hold me back and say, let her go through it, because I was ready to jump in and attack children. And he would hold me back, and he's like, she's got to learn to deal with it. And how many times, when she was saying, like, she went to college and she didn't realize how much she was relying on us, again, stepping back. She's been making her own formula since she was 8, something like that, and I was a teacher, so I tried all different ways of, like, I came up with a chip system of how to count her fee counts for the day, which is we count grams of protein, grams of phenylalanine, milligrams, and so I would have chips. I tried all different ways to get her to keep track of what she was eating. She resisted the most, and then, like she said, she and her sister were joined at the hip, and I never realized how much her sister did for her, and I thought she was doing it for herself. And it turns out it was her sister was doing it for her. So, but it is hard. The social transition, all that is very hard. And with school, the advocacy, you have to advocate for your kids with the 504 plans. What Katie didn't say, and I was sitting here going, say it, was we had the PKU clinic in Maine sends a team to the school. And it's a nutritionist, a nutritionist, a social worker, and a parent that works for the clinic that goes and presents to the cafeteria and the cafeteria staff and the head of the nutrition department. And they do a presentation, because when the girls were first starting school, they thought it was, oh, mom says she has an allergy. And I was like, no, this isn't mom saying she has an allergy. And their demeanor changed completely after they met with the team. They were like, we didn't realize it was so serious. Oh my goodness. They were completely on board after that. And we were lucky. It was a small town, underfunded school, but the cafeteria people, because it's a small town, took my girls as their own, and they would come up with recipes. And then there's, I don't know if it's like this for the HCU community, but with PKU, a lot of the cafeteria workers, a lot of the nutritionist specialists in charge, the directors, contact each other. They each have each other's phone number if they have a PKU kid in the school, and they share recipes. And I know you guys went to camp at MSSM, the Maine School of Science and
Mathematics.
Math and Science in Limestone, which is way up north. And the chef there contacted all the others. So when she went to college, because it was Sodexo, the college she went to used Sodexo. So when we went there, and I told the disabilities director, well, she went to Maine School of Science and Math and Science, and the Sodexo people, they were like, oh, we use Sodexo. They contacted each other, the heads of the nutrition departments, and it's amazing. So, you never know the resources that are out there until it happens. But as a parent, you have to advocate. And as a parent, my husband did a good thing, even though I was not happy about it, by holding me back, because I was going to punch a couple of kids, is let them go through it, because that's how they learn, as hard as it is. That's how they learn.
Thank you. Social, yes.
Do either of you know someone with your same disorder that has been a support for you, or you've been a support for them?
In Maine, we have a camp that we go to once a year that I've been going to since my sister was born, since before I was born. I've been going to it for my entire life, and it's filled with all these people with PKU and allied disorders. So we've got people with PPA, PKU, HCU. We've got lots of different kids, and that has been my support system. I wait a year, and some years it really was camp to camp. And I would wait for that support. And every year I go there and I feel normal because a couple of people decided there wasn't enough community around us. And it was my favorite place as a kid. After the weekend, I remember I cried a couple of times because camp was over. I love camp.
So growing up, I had my brother who also has our condition, but we were the only two in Utah who had it, and then we didn't know of anyone in the United States who had it. We knew of a couple of people in the Middle East and in Europe, but we didn't know. And because my condition is often misdiagnosed as osteogenesis imperfecta, we didn't know anyone. So it wasn't until I was 26 that I met someone who wasn't my brother that had our condition, and that was life-changing. We're email buddies now. She actually lived in Fall River but is attending school at Penn. I was in a couple of newspaper articles growing up just about my condition. I was a theater kid, so there was an article about me on stage, and every dance and twirl was a risk or whatever. They're a little dramatic. But so someone found that article, found me on Facebook and messaged me. So since then, I started a Facebook group for our condition. We've found 10 people in the United States with it. We've found 15 in Europe. I think 4 or 5 in the Middle East, like in India, and we all are on first name basis now because of social media. So it's been an amazing experience to finally talk with people who get it 100%. I talk about it face forward at NextStep. We're all coming from different diagnoses, but we have similar impact and experience, so we get to have that collaboration, that sense of community, that sense of I get to skip all the BS in our conversations because you know what it's like. And so then having a group that actually had my exact condition has been amazing. So we have a WhatsApp group, and I'm learning Spanish because of there's a handful in Madrid that I'm trying to speak with. So social media has been fantastic.
So we added medical. We were just going to do 3, but we wanted to make sure that we filled it in. I think medical is pretty important, that transition from pediatric into adult care. I think I don't know that I have any ducks left to see who the winner is, but I believe that the question was, out of 100 people that were interviewed, how many of them said that they have ever torn an article out of a magazine while waiting in a doctor's office? So I think I'm just going to give you the answer so we can move on. How many do you think it is?
Torn?
Not everyone, believe it or not. It was, I know it was kind of high. Actually, I think these people were all liars, because what would you have said? Like, if you say 75, how many of you would have thought that's pretty close? Lower? 50? Do you think lower than 50? You think lower than 50? Lower than 45? Okay, the experts over there, it's 43 is the number, yes. These were either honest people because they didn't take the article, or they were a bunch of liars because they didn't tell the truth. So medical transition is that thing that it's kind of, from a program perspective, it's the third rail for us as we're discussing, as we're talking about what we're going to discuss with a group of teenagers or young adults. As soon as we talk about medical transition, we watch the curtain go down because it can be very difficult to think about leaving the doctors that have been with you through your entire life and that treat you like family.
And nurses.
Medical care providers. And there is, because it's not very clear in many cases exactly when and how it happens, there tends to be this hope that maybe it doesn't have to. So if you check out and don't talk about it, that hope can sometimes live. So particularly with NextStep, we have worked really hard to pull the question from them and to get them to start the conversation and understand that it's part of really being an adult, is kind of managing your own health care. So in talking about medical transition, we talk about adherence, we talk about adhering to your diet, adhering to your meds, as well as getting a brand new care team and maybe moving to another place with another group of folks. So I don't know if you guys, I know that we talked a little bit about it, and it's something that you're one of those people that still pulls the curtain down, that it's a scary thing that's going to happen at some point, and Keita has transitioned and has struggled at times with that transition. So I want to give us just a minute, because we don't have much time left, to maybe talk about that.
Sure. So it's a tricky thing, especially for my condition, to transition, because the pediatric was the one who diagnosed it, who followed me and my brother, and then at some point I would still go back to the children's hospital for some things and then the adult hospital for others. So it was tricky, and like the thing that really got me to transition was moving away. And it was really hard. I will say that my parents did a really good job of, as soon as I was 15, 16, I was the one talking in our appointments. Whenever we'd go to the doctor and they'd ask what's up, what's new, what's happening, I was the one answering. I still would, double check with my mom, like, that's right? I am hurting, right? But she made sure that I knew what my diagnosis was, how it impacted me. I knew my limitations. I had to do all the talking, which really helped. When I had to move, I knew what kind of doctor to look for. I knew what kind of team I wanted. I knew what I was comfortable with and what I wasn't, which was really huge. Being able to name all the things on a list really helped the transition for me, and knowing that I'd practiced with my mom, my dad, my grandma, who was ever taking me to the clinic that day, I had already had enough practice that when I had to do it on my own, it wasn't as scary.
I am in the process of transitioning. I haven't quite started yet, but I'm thinking about it. So I'm not exactly an authority on the subject.
What scares you about it?
What scares me most is the idea that I'm not going to be able to contact these people that have known me my entire life again. Because this team has been with me since before I can remember. Like, I can name them, I'm on first name basis with them, and they know me. And the idea that I'm going to be away from these care providers who know me, who see me as more than just a patient, see me as like a kid, a person, that is the most terrifying part for me. It's not the idea that I'm going to be taking point. I'm daunted by that, don't get me wrong, but it's something that's going to happen. It's the idea that I'm going to be just another patient to just another doctor. And that is what I need to come to terms with the most.
I very much appreciate, you saying it exactly like that, because I've heard a lot of young people that have said to me, well, my mom told me that there's, these adult care providers are going to treat me just like my pediatric providers did. And I'll tell you, that's just not true. It's not realistic. Yes, they're very different cultures professionally, thank you. And these other people have known you your entire life. So they did know you when you were a cute little baby, and now you're grown. I mean, you're still probably adorable, but it's in a different way. And the billing is different. The social culture of adult care is different than it is in pediatric care. The number of staff that are available. So I think setting that as an expectation is setting up for failure. So just like all of the transitions that we talk about with our young people, we try and be as realistic about what it's going to be and what are the skills that you're going to need to be able to be successful. I think understanding that is the case, that you're going to get to know them. They're wonderful people. They are caregivers. They're very smart. They're going to take care of you, but it's going to feel a little bit different. Having that conversation is really important on the front end, as opposed to trying to recover from that on the back end, and then having that, the desire to actually make that move no longer there.
I was going to say, also with finding a team and my doctors in the adult clinic, I suddenly realized that I had more power. Like I went to a couple that we just didn't click, and then I was like, wait, I don't have to go back to him if I don't want to, because, well, I mean, as long as it's still within my insurance. But I got to find people that I really enjoyed seeing, and that did give me that sense of humanity and personableness that I really wanted. So knowing that I could always switch doctors if I needed to, if I wasn't comfortable, having that knowledge made me feel a lot better.
You are the CEO of your own healthcare company. That's right. You can fire them.
Yeah.
In fact, you should.
I know for a lot of the metabolic clinics, there may not be an adult provider. Have you heard if that's the case in your area, or is there an adult provider for you to transition to?
There is not in my area, actually. I was looking into it mostly because I was thinking that I would move in my adult years. I would like to go to a big city, and there would likely be one in a major city. I was looking into New York and Boston, actually. Oh.
So somebody who's boarded in genetics and metabolism is not actually a pediatrician or an internist per se. The issue is whether your clinic takes adults or not. So if you have if you have somebody that's pediatric trained and is a geneticist or metabolist, according to our board, we can take care of adults. Now this adds a whole nother complexity to transition, because I can have adults in my clinic at Children's Hospital in DC, but I can't admit them to the hospital. And they're specialists, so they're cardiologists and they're ophthalmologists at a certain age have to be adult ophthalmologists, but I'm still running their metabolic disease. So not every institution. So Boston actually has an adult metabolic and genetic program. So they actually have in a different hospital than Boston Children's. DC does not. We run all our metabolics out of the Children's Hospital in DC. And as I said at the beginning, I'm also an internist, so I get to wear both hats. And so this is where metabolic transition gets infinitely more complicated, because you may actually be going to the Children's Hospital as a 60-year-old to have your metabolic disease taken care of. You're dreading. Yeah. Adolescents and young adults really don't like Dora. By the time they turn about 35, they accept Dora on the walls. The front desk, the entrance to the hospital never knows what to do with our patients that are adults, but they've gotten better. They get their name tag that says genetics. But they occasionally, if there's a new person, they're confused. The consents still say for your child. We've tried to change those. But it gets much more confusing, because you just have to figure out who the metabolist in your area is and find out whether they take adult patients or whether it's somebody else. It's the other specialists that you have to do a much more complicated transition. And if you have to get admitted to the hospital, because some children's hospitals will not take metabolic patients older than 26, because that's the age that the hospitalists in the pediatric institution aren't supposed to be taking care of folks. There are exceptions. Talk to your metabolist. They should know what your areas is.
Yes. And then there's also the issue of primary care and who's going to be your go-to.
I was just going to add actually a bonus to so the clinic I go to in Chicago sees children and adults. But the one thing is, when you get to the previous clinic in Chicago, they treated both, but it was within a pediatric ward. So there was a point I had to be hospitalized. And well, when you're an adult in a pediatric ward, it's not meant for an adult. So when I was admitted, that was the thing. They put me in a bed for like a little kid, and I'm hanging off there. I'm like, I have nowhere to go here. And the blood pressure cuffs don't fit. So they're looking at you like, well, what are we supposed to do with you? You're an adult. And so there are perks to going, and they understand the adult body a lot better, because you're everything changes. So the care you get is more personalized. They don't treat you like a child, which is really nice as an adult too. So don't let it intimidate you, just because it's really nice to be treated like an adult. The only thing that still is frustrating us is they're like, and your child's name is like, I'm the patient, thank you. But once you're past that and they get to know you, it's so much easier. So don't ever be intimidated to leave. And you actually sometimes, and it's nice, you can fire a doctor. It's a really nice ability to have and to be able to form those bonds with the people who are going to be taking care of you, hopefully for the rest of your life.
So I'm looking at the clock, and Danae, you can help me. We're supposed to be done like 2 minutes ago?
Oh.
Yes? So can I open it up for any final absolutely questions that you've been sitting on the whole time and you really want to ask this amazing panel of people? We've really enjoyed being able to speak to you, and it seemed pretty open. But is anybody that's sitting on a question? Sex, drugs, and rock and roll, anything's open. Okay. You want to close it down?